Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President and CEO of the Greater Houston Partnership, Bob Harvey.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I know some of you were just receiving your meal, so feel free to keep eating, of course, and we'll get the program back underway. I do want to recognize several elected officials who came in after Scott's remarks earlier, and I'd ask the elected officials to stand and remain standing and for you to hold your applause. Beginning with Senator Carol Alvarado, Harris County Commissioner Adrian Garcia, Alief ISD Trustee Darlene Breaux, and Houston Community College Chair Carolyn Evans Shabazz. We recognize the four of you. Thank you. And one thing we wanted to do at this event is also to recognize all of the superintendents, college presidents, and college chancellors that are here. So would all the superintendents, presidents, and chancellors that are here please stand and let us recognize you as a group. Thank you. Great. Thank you all for being here. Now, some of you heard me talk earlier this year about our strategic plan that we call Houston Next, and our work to advance Houston as a great global city. And one of the core elements of that plan is what Scott referred to earlier, and that's providing opportunity for all Houstonians. As the partnership works to support a strong, diverse economy, it's paramount that the growth we achieve is felt by all Houstonians, our neighbors who are seeking opportunity to improve their own lives and that of their families. And the opportunity for all Houstonians to succeed is dependent on two things: a strong education system and career pathways that connect with each individual. A strong public education system is the bedrock of long-term success for our young people, and the partnership is a leading advocate for a high-quality public education system that is properly funded, accountable, and equitably serves all the students in the region. Now, during the 86th legislative session, the partnership advocated for what became the most consequential public school finance since perhaps 1993. And on a statewide scale, House Bill 3 secured $11.5 billion in total funding for public ed, $6.5 billion of that for school finance reform, including $2 billion for teacher compensation, and House Bill 3 also secured $5 billion for local property tax reductions. For our region, that translates into $618 million in new state funding, an additional 1,060 allotment per student, and a $448 million reduction in recapture payments by local districts. Now, that's right. And as you heard earlier, we had the two key authors of that bill, House Committee Chair Dan Huberty and Senate Chair Larry Taylor here this morning. So again, we owe them a big round of applause and thanks. Now, Houston area students will directly benefit from the funding allocated to proven programs directed at the highest need student populations, so that the students have an opportunity to graduate fully prepared to enter a 21st century workforce. The partnership is also engaged in workforce development through our Upskill Houston initiative, and since its launch in 2014, Upskill is widely recognized as one of the top industry-led workforce development programs in the country. Today, Upskill includes over 200 education, industry, community, and public partners aligning the needs of the current and emerging workforce with the needs of industry, thereby creating opportunity for all. Now, as part of our new strategy, the partnership is taking this program, meaning Upskill, to scale, creating pathways so that all Houstonians can succeed. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Having been appointed by Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Mike Morath took office as Commissioner of Education in January of 2016. As commissioner, he heads the Texas Education Agency, which oversees pre-kindergarten through high school education for more than 5 million students enrolled in both traditional public schools and charter schools. He has worked to focus the state agency on his 4 priorities, including recruiting, supporting, and retaining teachers and principals, building a foundation of math and reading, connecting high school to career and college, and improving low-performing schools. The Commissioner is committed to improving outcomes for all students across our state. His dedication to innovation and addressing the needs of our children began with his work on the Dallas ISD Board of Trustees, where he served for more than 4 years. And during that time, he focused on academic improvements. And by his final year on the board, the district had seen improvement in various areas, including significant increases in kindergarten readiness, math proficiency, and graduation rates. Over the course of his time as TEA Commissioner, he's already made a significant impact on the state as a whole and is moving Texas forward in ensuring that all our students graduate prepared for a career in a 21st century work environment. So before I bring up Commissioner Morath, I should note that I also follow his presentation with brief remarks on the partnership's education platform. But I will promise to be brief. So right now, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome TEA Commissioner Mike Morath.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It is an honor to be here with so many people who care about public education. It is, in fact, an honor for me for the last 3.5 years to have a role where every day I get to wake up and think about how to help 5.5 million kids. And I can tell you there is not a better job on the planet, although the job does come with some downsides from time to time. I figured I would talk a little bit today about my journey because where I am and my path to get to this point is somewhat non-traditional for someone in this kind of role. As Bob mentioned, I was on the Dallas board for 4.5 years, but I am not necessarily an educator by trade. I taught for 6 months. I was a computer science teacher. I was terrible at it, and the kids deserve their money back. But I ran a software company for a few years in Dallas and achieved a good level of success with it. But along the lines, I was also pretty passionate about kids issues for much of my life. I was a Big Brother for 10 years. Raise your hand here if you're a member of the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. Thank you for your work. Imagine how different this world would be if we each took responsibility for one life that we didn't have to. I remember my experience with my littles. I had 2 different littles that I was matched with over the course of 10 years in Dallas. And the first little, we were matched for about 6 years. And mom loved him, wanted the best for him. But he didn't know his father. And he bounced around to a bunch of different schools in Dallas. And it was objectively for me, in trying to remove myself from the situation, it was odd to juxtapose my life in this country with his. Because I didn't get to pick my parents, none of us do, but I was born to 2 parents that loved each other and loved me, and we weren't rich, but I never went home hungry. I always had a floor to sleep on, or a bed to sleep on, not a floor. When we moved to Texas, my mom calls TEA. We moved here when I was about 10 years old. This is pre-internet, so not all the information was at her fingertips, and she talked to about 6 or 7 people at TEA and said, "We're moving to North Texas. I want to find a school that is great for my little boy." The first 5 or 6 people that she talked to at TEA said, "All of our schools are great. You can move anywhere you want to." And then she got somebody that gave her a more, we'll call it direct response, and said, "You should move to Garland. They have created this vertically aligned international baccalaureate pathway. If your kid gets in there, he's going to get a great education." And we moved to Garland, and I got in there, and it was great. It was phenomenal. I graduated from high school with 36 hours of credit. I got a full ride to go to the university of my choice. I ended up graduating from my university in 2.5 years. I was very well prepared. After school, I started a software company. It was a catastrophe. I learned a lot. I avoided alcoholism and picked myself up, dusted myself off, and tried again. My second company was far more successful, but I got a chance to live the American dream. But reflecting on that, it took a lot of hard work and dedication on my part, but you don't get to pick your parents. You don't get to pick the schools that they put you in, and in both cases, I won every kind of lottery imaginable. And actually both of my littles, they didn't win either lottery. My first little was basically homeless the entire time that we were matched. And he was a good kid and respectful. hardworking, full of love and energy, all that you see in the eyes of young people all over the country. But Mom had a hard time getting it together. She was in and out of rehab basically the whole time that we were matched. And the schools that he was in, who were filled with angels who love children, who work hard, supporting children every day, he still was he got lost in the system. Nobody ever said, I'm going to lay hands on you, you're not going to get past me. And when he was 16 years old, he wanted to apply for his first job. I wanted to help him out. So he applies for a job at Brahms. And as he's filling out the job application, I realized, helping him, that his level of literacy was insufficient to fill out an entry-level fast food application. You know, we're all called to do things with our life. We are given breath for a very brief period of time. And hopefully we're lucky enough to find the moments in life where you're steered in the direction that you're supposed to be steered. And it was very clear to me in that moment that I didn't want to let that happen to anybody else. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of kids like him in Dallas, in Houston, all over the state of Texas. And in the success that I have had and lived, I owed it to my brothers and sisters to ensure that everybody develops the ability to read, write, and do math at skill, become the best version of themselves. So I sold my software company and I ran for the school board. And for those of you contemplating similar moves, I certainly recommend it because when you join a big city school district's board of trustees, as I'm sure you know, everyone always respects your judgment. No one ever questions your integrity. You know, the world is always behind you, just like they were when you were in your lucrative private sector background. I don't regret it for a moment. We did some great things on the Dallas board while I was there. I learned a lot from so many skilled educators who were willing, even then, after having poured love and skill into me for the 13 years that I was in public school in this country, I got more of an education from them while I was on the school board in Dallas. And I'm grateful to them, to our servants of the highest order. Along the way, Governor Abbott saw fit to give me this opportunity to serve in a new capacity. So I spent the first 6 months just trying to learn the state. I had a pretty good sense of challenges that we face in big city school districts from my time on the school district in Dallas on their board. But it's a big state, and comparing Little Dumas ISD up in the Panhandle to big Dallas ISD and everything in between, the ability to deliver on the promise of public education to all 5.4 million souls in Texas public schools, this is a difficult challenge that we face as a state collectively. I spent a lot of time looking at data because I wanted to understand where the system was. And so this is a picture of the data that we have today. And what you see here is a selection of little data points in the public education system. We start with kindergartners, with 5-year-olds who enter in September or August of every year. And we take an entry-level literacy assessment to see if they are ready for pre-literacy, their letters. And only half of our kindergartners are ready for kindergarten when they start. We fast forward 5 years to the end of 3rd grade, and we look at the percentage of kids who are reading and doing math on grade level at the end of 3rd grade. And still only about half, although you can see year over year there is progress. We keep our kids 5 more years at the end of 8th grade, and now more than half, and in math, well over half of our kids are doing mathematics on grade level and reading on grade level, but still, this is not where we want it to be. The interesting thing when you look at some of these numbers, though, is to reflect that this is, in fact, better than it has ever been. Our graduation rate, which you see that tall bar with 90%, or the 4-year graduation rate in the state of Texas is 90%. 90% of our students graduate on time in Texas public schools. This puts us in the top 5 of all states in the country. This is the highest the graduation rate has ever been. It's doubly remarkable when you consider the level of student poverty that we have in Texas is more than double what they have in the other top 5 states. It is a testimony to the hard work of our educators, our school board members, our superintendents, our principals, our teachers, our students themselves, our parents, all over the state of Texas, working to improve the system over time. But graduation from high school is only good enough for so much in the modern economy. The modern republic requires citizens who are engaged, who can separate the truth from fiction when they're reading it on Twitter, which was a skill that I was not required to develop as a child. And this means that you graduated from high school, so what? 55% of our kids are making it into college. And after high school, 6 years after high school graduation, so class of 2012, fast forward 6 years in the future. In 6 years, what percentage of Texas high school students have obtained in that 6-year window a 4-year bachelor's degree, or a 2-year associate's degree, or a trade credential? And the number is only 31%, less than a third. Raise your hand if you in this room possess either a trade credential, an associate's degree, or a bachelor's degree. The truth is, if we ask that question in Texas public schools today, and ask, will you get this? Everyone will raise their hands, but the numbers are only about a third make it there. This is a huge challenge for us, and it does not mean that public education is somehow not functioning. Because the thing is these numbers are better than they have ever been before. I talk to Texans of a certain age, and there's this natural human tendency to reflect on how it used to be in the good old days. Back in my day, if they did them just like Miss Johnson, everything would be just fine. The thing is, our memories are flawed pretty deeply, because the rate of adult literacy in this country was only about half of what it is today. Back in the 1950s. In the 1970s, we just didn't care about half of our children. We are much better than we have ever been before, but we're still not good enough for all of our kids. This is the story of public education. I skipped this one number here that you see, that's 16%, the SAT or the ACT. If you look, only 16% of Texas high school seniors get an SAT or ACT score that's high enough to graduate them prepared for college, according to the SAT or the ACT. Over the last 20 years, that number has been about the same. That's what you see on this chart. Since from 1996 to 2017, that number has been basically the same. The interesting thing is, let's look at by type of student. Rich kids versus poor kids. I'll simplify. It's actually non-economically disadvantaged versus economically disadvantaged. And the thing is we have gotten better with every type of kid in our schools. We've gotten better with all of our kids. Our schools have significantly improved their level of college readiness, although you can see that the rate of improvement for the haves is noticeably higher than the rate of improvement for the have-nots. And so when I look at a graph like this, it gives me hope. It shows that we have, in fact, improved and we are improving. But it also spells out the challenge quite clearly. We have to get better faster than we ever have before. Now, I'll talk to a lot of people and they'll say, well, I don't understand how this is possible. How is it that we're better with low-income kids? And how is it that we're better with middle-income kids? And yet we're the same overall. The truth is we have a lot more low-income kids than we used to. Over the last 20 years, we've seen a significant growth in student poverty. Roughly 60% of kids in the state of Texas require some form of subsidy in order to make sure that they can eat. This is a big challenge because it's not that poverty is destiny. It is not that being low income somehow prevents you from learning how to read. But having a public education system that supports good outcomes for all children, regardless of background, is difficult. And the higher the density of kids that walk in with significant challenges from the neighborhood, the harder the job it is for the adults in that school. And there's no reason to run from it. We need to organize our system to accomplish great outcomes regardless of where the kid came from. If you're interested, this is the same picture broken down by race. And in many ways, race simply is a mirror of class in this country. If you have the opportunity to choose rich parents, I encourage you to do so. But in some ways, race, there are noticeable differences by race. The history of our country is still leading into the present, and we have to take affirmative steps to improve that situation, focused policy to improve that situation. But recognize that class is really the primary driver. So again, if you have the chance to choose rich parents, do so. Having looked at this data and having spent 6 months at the beginning of my tenure talking to students, teachers, parents, principals, superintendents, school board members, community leaders, all over the state of Texas, what we needed to do from this is congeal around an action plan to drive change. Because I have yet to meet the Texan who does not want the best for kids. We're humans, we're wired for that. Our species would have died long ago if we didn't care about our young. But the question is how? And so we start with the end in mind. Is there a consensus in Texas around what it is that we want from public education? And I can tell you, I'm here to tell you there is. It's a remarkably clear consensus. What we want collectively is that we want every child in Texas public schools. And when we say every child, we don't mean unless you're from a poor rural hamlet. We don't mean unless you're in the suburbs, unless you're in an urban high-poverty district. We don't mean unless you're black or white or brown. We don't mean unless you are in special education or unless you are a foster child or unless you're a homeless child. We mean every child, regardless of background, regardless of zip code, needs to be prepared for success coming out of our school systems. That is our collective vision. And prepared for success isn't just, you graduated, have a nice life. It is that you are equipped for what will come next, that you're not just going to go to college, accumulate some credits, some debt, and drop out. You're going to make it all the way through. You're not just going to get a job, but you're going to get a job that will allow you to make a meaningful wage so that you can take care of yourself and your family, live a life of productivity as well as purpose. That if you wish to join the military, that you will survive boot camp. It is not enough just to have graduated, to be prepared for success. And so our strategic plan is anchored around this end in mind, that every child will be prepared for success in college, career, or the military. And how do we do that? There's actually some degree of consensus around this as well. We know that the single most important in-school factor that affects student outcomes is the teacher in the classroom. And so we have got to be relentless in how we recruit, support, and retain teachers and principals. But this is very difficult in our country where we have arrived at this collection vision of teaching that is in some ways broken. You're at a cocktail party, solving all the world's problems, heavily lubricated. You're after church, talking to your friends and neighbors, and the subject of teaching comes up. And invariably, this cliche enters our minds like a virus, and it is those who can do, those who can't teach. And there is no more broken view of this profession than this. When you think about what teachers do, it is a remarkably difficult job. I want you to consider for a moment what happens when you meet somebody on the street who introduces themselves as a neurosurgeon. And this person, when they are prepping for surgery, they're in the clean room and they're scrubbing themselves of impurity because years and years of behavior have made that automatic. And they're thinking about what they read in the most recent medical journal about some promising practice. And they're thinking about the lasers and the scalpels, the tools that they will use in that surgical operation. And they're going over in their head the patient's case history and everything that could go right and could go wrong. And they walk into that operating room, and there is a patient whose brain they are responsible for molding, and that patient is asleep on a table. And our teachers walk into operating rooms every single day, and they're operating on 20 brains simultaneously, and there ain't no anesthesia. There's a lot of active participation from the patients in that operation. This is the most difficult job you will ever see in your life. And we have got to respect this profession and support it in that way. And we've made major steps in this state to do just that. I'm going to come back to it. But let's wave a magic wand, solve the challenges of the teaching profession. You still have these 5-year-olds who every year they turn 5, and they come into our classrooms, and half of them still aren't prepared for basic lessons in literacy and numeracy. And what does that mean for us as a system? Because what we would have to do if a child was, say, 1 year behind developmentally is that the kindergarten teacher has to get a year and 3 months worth of gain in that student. And then the first grade teacher has to get a year and 3 months worth of gain in that student. And the second grade teacher has to get a year and 3 months worth of gain in that student. And the third grade teacher has to get a year and 3 months worth of gain in that student. And you only have to do that for basically every kid in your classroom in some of our schools, but half of the kids in Texas. This is a system, as it's structured, that requires a very simple thing from its teachers, and that's perfection. Because that's what I've just described, something that every year you get a year and 3 months worth of gain. I mean, the Catholic Church describes a miracle as something that comes from nothing. Well, this is something that comes from a heck of a lot of hard work. And so we're going to have to reorganize our system to shift the attention and resources to the early grades, to the early years, because it is fundamentally much easier to address the achievement gap if you never let it start in the first place. But oh, by the way, we have kids on the other end of that continuum. The kids in high school that somewhere in Houston are going to raise their hand today and say, "Teacher, when am I ever going to use this?" This question of relevance and in many ways of rigor. Is it too easy for them? I mean, if you're in your senior year in high school and you're going to prom and homecoming and cruising for chicks, I'm pretty sure that still happens. Is that what we should be expecting from people who are fixing to get sent off into life when it's really complicated? No, it's got to be the hardest year of your life academically. It has got to transition you in a handshake to higher education. It has got to be connected. And sometimes you think about this conflict between vocational education and a liberal arts background. Well, I mean, unless they were born to a trust fund, they are in fact going to have to work. There's no reason to think of these things as conflicts. So we've got to make it relevant and rigorous. And when we think about the fourth key priority that you see up here, it's a little different than the other three, because the fourth key priority is about a moral commitment to our kids. We live in a country that has these foundational documents that say all men were created equal, that we are endowed with certain rights to pursue, happiness among them. And the public school system that we have is the guarantor on those rights. It's what equips us for this journey. And the question is every school delivering on that promise? And the unfortunate truth is some of the schools that we have are not good enough for my kids or your kids or the kids that are in them. And it's not due to lack of effort. It's not due to lack of energy. It's not because we don't have loving people. It's because this business is a hard business. I ran a software company. I can tell you it's a lot easier writing lines of code than it is running a school. It's a lot easier flipping houses than it is running a school. When you think about the job that is public education, they do write lines of code. They do build buildings. They do run transit systems. They do run food service operations. But every single day, they teach kids. They help little 3-, 4-, 5-year-old bundles of energy become the best versions of themselves. There is no more difficult job in the Republic than this. And so what do we do to wrap our arms around our most struggling schools? To change the trajectory when our own expectations have gotten too low for the kids there. This is the strategic plan. And we think about being focused on this and how to drive change here. We stand at a unique time in Texas. Bob talked earlier about House Bill 3 and as Scott as well, about this truly historic piece of legislation authored by Chairman Taylor and Chairman Huberty in this room. You should all give them a standing ovation, by the way. Because there have been unprecedented resources, not just money, but targeted money in ways that we know work, that will drive support for the teaching profession, that will drive support for the neediest students, that will work in a strategic and reinforcing ways to give Texas a future like it never has, to give kids a future like they never have. I'm so excited to be part of this process at this time. Getting back to what it means to improve the ability to recruit, support, and retain teachers and principals. Do you realize that only 4% of Texas high school students today express an interest in becoming a teacher? For the first time in U.S. history, the majority of parents don't want their children to be teachers. This is where we find ourselves today in Texas public education. The teacher you're most likely to run into today is in his or her first year. But 30 years ago, the teacher you were most likely to run into was in their 15th year. The problems of retention and recruitment are significant. And it comes down to really two things. It comes down to pay and working conditions. It's a tough job, and it's not like we pay teachers poorly, but we certainly don't pay them what they're worth. And do you get raises in public education? I don't know if you've ever looked at a salary schedule, but you start with about $50,000 and you die at about $50,000 as a teacher. At least that's how it was before House Bill 3 was passed. Because what has happened is the legislature has said, we will create a pathway for teachers in the state of Texas to make 6 figures. This is an unprecedented change in how we will support the teaching profession. Billions of dollars were put into Texas public schools to raise everyone's salary and to create a pathway for the best and brightest when serving at the neediest schools to not run away from their classrooms and get pay raises, but to stay in their classrooms and get significant pay raises. This is a historic change in public policy, one that they did not do in the reforms of 1993, the ones that they did not do in the reforms of 1950, one that they have never done. But this has happened because of the leadership of members of the Texas legislature and the governor today. It is an unprecedented and trajectory-changing course of events for Texas public school teachers and students. But wait, there's more. We have to think about this challenge of our kindergarten teachers, and we really know what the solution is. Students who are low income, who participate in pre-kindergarten, have an increase in readiness of 16% relative to those who don't. We know that this works. So if you know that something works, you do more of it. And so what has the legislature done? They have funded, with an early education allotment, the requirement for every eligible low-income family to be exposed to full-day, high-quality pre-K. This is amazing. We have known for some time that we need to do this, and lo and behold, public policy is engaged in what we do, with the money to back it up, the resources to back it up. This is why it's so exciting to be in Texas public education at this time, but there's more than that. Not only did the legislature do that, the legislature added the option for local schools, if they wish to add 30 days to the calendar in elementary school, and this is funded, to pay your teachers to work longer, to work over the summer, so that when you think about the cognitive capacity that is sucked out of so many of our kids over the course of summer, because my kids, when they come home, they're going to listen to mom who's a doctor and me who doesn't shut up, and they're going to hear a constant vocabulary, and they're going to hear discussions of public policy. But a lot of kids, when they go home, they don't have that. They enter an educational desert. And we have given, with the acts of House Bill 3 in the legislature, the option for school districts to address needy students like never before, and to slow the year down for the teachers, to make it the job of teaching easier so you can breathe, because it is very difficult to cover all this content in only 180 days. And they don't do it like that in a lot of places in this world. But we do it like that here, except now we have set up a course of change like nothing that's ever been. And when you think about where we are and the impact of House Bill 3, I mean, the last time that we talked seriously about this kind of change in the calendar of public education was, I think, roughly 1890. So this is like a once-in-a-century reform for our educators to provide support to the neediest students. On the other end of the spectrum, we know that roughly 1% of students in the state of Texas today graduate with an associate's degree. Imagine that, by the way. You're graduating from high school, 18 years old, and nothing says you're college ready like you've already got a degree. So we've got 1% of our students that are graduating with an associate's degree. But in specialized high schools, P-Tech high schools, early college high schools, it's 6 times that rate. So what are we doing? We're trying to grow these, and House Bill 3 puts a $50 per student incentive on to launch more and more of these high schools. Think about this for a first-generation, low-income student, navigating the difficulties of class selection, of college selection, of trying to get financial aid done, except it's already done. They finish with an associate's degree. This is life-changing for them and their families. And we're seeing more and more and more of it. This is great news for the future of public education and for kids in Texas today. In addition, the legislature, as part of House Bill 3, placed additional funds at the table to boost college, career, and military readiness, and do this with a lens towards equity so that low-income students result in bigger and bigger payments when they achieve readiness for college, career, and the military. Every single special education student in the state of Texas who graduates ready for college will result in an extra $2,000 to the school systems. This is a significant change in incentives, and it is one that embraces an ethos that says we care about every child. We care about equity. We care about a belief that all children can learn and achieve at high levels. And the work that we do to try to improve our lowest performing schools is work that we are trying to significantly improve. At the agency, we have supports from the standpoint of how we work with school boards, how we work with school administrators, how we work with district administrators, how we work with teachers themselves, and it's an all-hands-on-deck effort to raise the floor as rapidly as possible. But the legislature, again, has created significant improvements in this, with 64% increase in funding for low-income students in the state of Texas this year versus last year because of House Bill 3. For the first time in the history of the state of Texas, your local property wealth does not matter in terms of how much money your school system gets. It is based entirely upon the needs of your students. It is the most equitable system of public education in the United States. It is focused on changing the cycle of poverty and making public education the vision of economic prosperity and the entity that can educate people to protect their freedoms, live lives of purpose and productivity. It's a remarkable time in public education in Texas. And if you're interested in how this looks in Harris County, you can see that for those of you familiar with Harris County, green is going to be areas where you're in your head, you know, that's where the highest level of poverty is. But in this particular case, as a result of House Bill 3, green means more money. Because what's going to happen is schools that are serving kids in those neighborhoods are going to get a significant infusion of resources this year and from this point forward. This all works, though, on a foundation of some basic ideas that we do believe that all kids can learn and achieve at high levels, and we're going to pay attention to this. So we have an accountability system that tells us how our schools are performing, that tells us, you know, if we believe that all kids can learn, and not in some abstract sense, but a very specific sense. For example, we believe that every third grader should be able to memorize their times tables. The question is are we doing that? Has every third grader memorized their times tables? And so we issue assessments to discern whether or not that's done, and we build action plans so that we can get better, because we don't live in a utopia. We live in a reality, and so the question is will next week be better than this week? And was this week better than the last? And so we use this information, this performance information about our schools, to better support our students, to better support our families. It's a critical piece of the ecosystem, and we've tried to build a system that is as fair as possible, one that recognizes high levels of achievement, as well as one that recognizes when students are growing multiple grade levels, even if they're all still multiple grade levels behind. Schools get the better credit of the two. It's the fairest system that we've ever had. And what we see is that there are educators all over the state of Texas that are getting it done. There's almost 300 campuses, 296 campuses, where more than 80% of the kids require some degree of financial support to eat. And yet, they have achieved at the highest level. They get an A in our accountability system. What can we learn from these schools? How can we make these schools unremarkable so that every school looks like that? That is our challenge, and that is what we use this information for. We know that it works, by the way. People think, you know, you're doing this testing and accountability and it's punitive, but research has shown that struggling students, when faced with an accountability system, end up not just doing better academically, but they end up making more money in their 20s than those that did not have that kind of support. We do this because it helps kids, because that's what we're focused on. That's what I'm focused on. We try to see improvement year over year to see how we are getting better. We want more kids in A campuses and fewer kids in F campuses. And we try to build a system and support our educators to achieve just that. But it is not easy. This is very difficult work. The legislature has passed an unprecedented bill to provide additional support to our educators all over the state of Texas. Trajectory changing once in a century. But I will say that if this strategic plan makes sense to you, if you like the things that I have said here, say, Mike, I'm right behind you. Knock it out. I can assure you that I will fail you, because the work of public education is harder than that. If we, as citizens, abdicate our responsibility for the schools that we own, you shouldn't expect great things, because this is very difficult work. The job of maximizing human potential in little bundles of energy, it's an all-in, all-hands-on-deck effort. And I know in many ways I'm preaching to the choir here. You're at a chamber luncheon, you clearly care about public education, but we have to volunteer in our schools. You got to mentor kids, you got to tutor kids, you got to bring the teachers a love offering. we've got to get involved in our schools. So if I can leave you with one message, it is this. I want you. You need to adopt a school. You need to adopt a kid. You need to adopt a teacher. You need to be engaged in this work because it is too difficult without your help. Together, I know that we can succeed. We can change the path of so many young people. And together, we can ensure that our system of public education is, in fact, what it deserves to be for all of our kids. You can think that this work is necessary morally, or you can think that this work is necessary economically. I don't care why. I just want you to be involved. So please get involved in your local school. Start volunteering in every way that you can. Bring your talents to our kids because they need you. God bless you for your work. God bless Texas.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for a report on the partnership's platform for improving student outcomes.
What a great set of remarks. I just wanted to bring the conversation back to Houston and to HISD, but I didn't anticipate what an uplifting set of remarks Mike would give. So let's give Mike another round of applause as he's leaving. I'll be brief, but I do want to bring this conversation back to HISD just for a minute, quite specifically to HISD. I know some of you are involved in other districts around the community. And let me start with some good news. HISD was rated B in this most recent round of accountability assessments on a district basis. That's with a score of 88, which actually places it very near the top, if not above, the major urban districts of Texas. So it's a great accomplishment. Now, and you know, some of the schools, like you would expect, River Oaks Elementary, Westview Elementary, some others, scored over 95. You kind of expect schools in these high-income areas to do well. But there are also schools like Bastion Elementary on the southeast side, 99% economically disadvantaged, that scored an 85, a good solid B on their report. So there has been real progress. There has been real good news at HISD. But 21 HISD campuses received an F rating this year. 29 received a D rating, which means between 60 and 69. 11,000 students attended a failing school, a school that received an F. 12 of the 21 F schools have received a failing grade at least once in the last 5 years. So each of these 11,000 students attending a failing school is a child, like Mike alluded to, who's being failed by a system that is supposed to build them up and create opportunity for them specifically. So for the sake of our future, we must all do better. We think the Houston Independent School District Board's long-term failure to consistently support all of our schools, all of our kids, warrants new leadership at HISD. HISD needs a fresh start, we believe. That's why we've called on Commissioner Morath to appoint a local board of managers to run the district that is composed of a diverse group of Houstonians who will prioritize our children and create sustainable conditions where clear-minded decisions can be made. They must be willing to commit to the long road. Fixing HISD will take years and will require an engaged and supportive community. We've laid out 5 principles at the partnership I'll just mention. We must prioritize our students by reconstructing a positive culture of governance and accountability. We must focus on the needs of our lowest performing campuses while continuing to grow excellence where it exists. We must develop campus-level autonomy and accountability to empower principals and teachers. We need a local board of managers that will identify and implement proven methods that have led to high student achievement, as was described by Mike in the case of Dallas. And finally, these community leaders must engage parents and community members to become more involved from the boardroom to the classroom if we are to elevate our schools and students. Now, as we navigate a period of uncertainty, the partnership will remain focused on these guiding principles. This is a time, we believe, for the Houston community to come together. This is an opportunity to reset the culture of governance and lift the entire system. And resetting the culture requires district leaders to be held accountable for their failures. It also requires a plan for a thoughtful transition that returns control back to the electorate, but with a stronger culture of governance that has been established within the district by that time. While the responsibility of the Board of Managers falls to Commissioner Morath, the success of Houston HISD and our students ultimately falls on all of us here in the room and throughout the Houston community. So what does it mean to act responsibly? First, consider what role you can play in ensuring that the Board of Managers is comprised of qualified community leaders who prioritize the needs of all HISD's children and believe that all children can learn and succeed. If and when the TEA announces a Board of Managers that it will be installed, they will be asking Houstonians to join the Board of Managers. We need to encourage qualified candidates to apply and create an environment to allow for these leaders to succeed. Second, the upcoming trustee elections in November, take them seriously. While we expect the TEA will announce an intervention at some point in the coming months, given the timing, there's a good chance these new board members will be seated as board members for at least a period of time. In other words, after the November election and after these new trustees are seated in January, we expect at this point that the board will function as a school board for some period of time prior to a Board of Managers. Therefore, these candidates, these races matter even in the short term. But importantly, they matter a lot in the long term because we want to transition back to an elected board. And when we transition back, we need qualified individuals serving as trustees. Now, if I think about the partnership's involvement in public ed, our involvement in HISD, I would say we've been episodic, would be a nice word, episodic in our engagement in the past. We are committed to staying engaged for the long haul through this transition, and we're talking about years. We're talking about 5 years. We're talking about a decade to really transform HISD. That means we as a business community can't see this as a quick one-and-done effort. This is going to be a major effort for many years, and we're committed to that. We're laser focused on improving HISD and building a brighter future for our children, but we need all of you. So please, as I mentioned, the most immediate challenge is to be involved in the election in November, the HISD election, but other elections across the community. 4 seats at HISD are contested in November. Those are critical. Not quite a majority of the 9-person board. Be involved. We'll need a voice of support for a Board of Managers. I know there's a voice in the community that says we need to hold on to an elected board over an appointed board. No one sees an appointed board as the right way to run a democracy. We see it as a necessary, expedient move to fix a system that can't otherwise be fixed. So please offer that support all over the community for an effective Board of Managers. So with that, let me, on a cheerful note, say thank you all for being here. Thank you to our panel. Thank you for all you're doing for public ed in Houston. We'll see you next year at a similar event. Thank you very much.